Okay, so ready for another round? Lord help me. I have been seeing a lot of videos lately on YouTube. In times of crisis, I turn to YouTube. So you have to be careful what you let yourself believe, I suppose, what you open yourself up to. And in fact, even turning on the radio, there's an early morning, Saturday morning talk show. I was listening. I'm the only lady in the world that listens to early morning local talk shows on the radio. I don't watch The View, I listen to the radio. I guess I'm so much like my dad. My dad always listened to talk radio. So, just different. It doesn't make me less female, it just makes me my father's daughter. But YouTube does have a lot of good content, and yet, even with some professionals who give very good, very sage advice, and I'm talking about mental health professionals. They have an Achilles heel or they have a blind spot. You know what an Achilles heel is? Well, ancient mythology. This Greek hero Achilles had a weak heel, and somehow that's how he died, you know. A blind spot would be like, I see a lot, but like I can't, like, your eyes actually have blind spots in them, where the optic nerve connects or something. And so you may not notice it, and it doesn't make you totally blind, but you do have a blind spot. And so thankfully, it doesn't prevent us from actually seeing, but we all have a blind spot. The thing is, some of these professionals, they have more than a blind spot, I would say. They have tunnel vision, they have blinders on. You know what blinders are? Like a horse, for example, having grown up in Amish country mostly, you used to see a lot of buggies. Now, thankfully, some of them are actually driving trucks and vans, and that's good because I'm telling you, I wouldn't be driving a buggy in this day and age, no way. And I always pray that they'll be safe, because every so often you hear about an accident. Apparently a buggy was on the way to church a couple weeks ago, and some old guy going to church hit them. Now, the horse was slightly injured, and all the people were slightly injured, but okay, so thank God for that. But this old man, you know, it's like you put this buggy on the road, and he's old and confused, and he's driving to church, and you have this really slow-moving carriage on a road that's not meant for very slow-moving things like lawn tractors and golf carts, you know. So anyway, I love the Amish and their culture. I'm not critical of it, but I'm saying buggies on highways is a bad idea. It's a bad idea. If you want to have buggies in your town, great. I mean, that's your town. And if you choose not to ride a buggy, that's great. Or drive a buggy, I should say. If you choose to use an electric scooter, an electric bike, that's a lot better than a buggy to me. That's a lot better. And so they do that. And so I think that's a great adaptation. But anywho, yeah. So in the olden days, the horses would have these blinders on, but they're also called blinkers, where they can't see the cars, so they're not going to shy. You know, when a horse shies, it rears up, it gets scared, and it panics. So the blinders help the horse to have that tunnel vision, and that was good for the horse, and it was good for the Amish family and the buggy. I'm not sure it's good for human beings, especially those in the counseling profession, to have blinders on. For example, I've been looking up videos about scapegoating, and they keep coming up, and at first it really sounds great. It's like, yeah, that is so right, that is so true. And then this guy starts going off on alcoholics. You know, you're scapegoating somebody when you label them. What if he said, potheads, the druggies? You know, I think that we need to stop using that term, alcoholic. in such a pejorative manner. I mean, there's a kinder term. I guess it would be substance dependent or something. Why can't they have, well, the old school people, alcoholic. So obviously, these types of people, they go into the profession because they're angry at, usually they're very angry at a relative, very often a parent or somebody they knew in their life, perhaps even a former spouse that was an alcoholic. I just hate alcohol. Yeah. You fail to grasp the complexity of things. So I'm never going to use that word for my mother again because it's very unkind. But I would say she had substance use disorder. When it came to beer, really. It was just beer. It wasn't whiskey. It wasn't even wine. It was just beer. She really was chemically dependent on it. And today, so many people are dependent on some chemical just to get by in life. And I realized how harsh and judgmental I was. I was critical of my mom. I would follow my dad's lead sometimes and sort of I wouldn't say viciously berate her, but I had a lack of respect for her. I would say that. And the thing was, my dad and she both drank, and there's really nothing wrong with that. The Bible doesn't say there's anything wrong with it. And by the way, if you say that the wine in the Bible really didn't have any alcohol in it, then how did Noah get drunk? If the wine wasn't alcohol, it didn't have alcohol. How did he get drunk? How did he plant a vineyard, drink some wine, get drunk, and then you know what happened after that? It was all downhill from there. And then, didn't Paul say, don't be drunk on wine? Don't get drunk. It leads only to dissipation. Correct? What is dissipation? Well, it's complete degradation and unraveling of the person. That's what dissipation is. So, if wine couldn't make you drunk, or if alcohol couldn't make you drunk, then how did you get drunk? This nonsense about, it's fine if you don't like drinking, it's fine if you want to crusade against it, but please don't promote this false narrative that the wine in the Bible, the wine that Jesus drank, was really just like Kool-Aid, not Kool-Aid in terms of, the bad thing that happened in the cult, but it's just like pop or juice. It didn't have any alcohol. Nonsense. It did have alcohol. Handle it. The Pharisees accused Jesus of being a wine bibber, which would be a drunk and a glutton, because he would go to parties, he'd have several slices of pizza and a couple of beers. That didn't make him a drunk or a glutton. He wasn't doing that all day, every day. But they accused him of that. So why would wine bibber be a pejorative term if the wine could not make you drunk? You see? Have I proven my point? Thank you. So back to the thing with my mother, I don't know if you want to call my father dependent on that substance either, because he certainly did it frequently, and I don't blame him. But he had much stronger self-control than my mother had. He had a strong will. Often he'd say, iron will, because he'd been in the Marines, so he could do it. He could diet, But then he would lose weight, and then he'd exercise a lot, but he would gain a little bit of weight. And then he was kind of fat phobic because he hated gaining weight. And so, Erica, how much do you think I weigh? Do I look fat? And he'd raise up his shirt. He's just so obsessed with his weight. And then after I got married, every time we would go to visit them, before I was pregnant, he said, Erica, how much do you weigh now? It's like he was obsessed with my weight. That's not normal. It's not. I don't know what my weight is. Yeah, could I lose a few pounds? Absolutely, I could. I should, and I want to. Yes, I do. But yeah. There was one time he really hurt my feelings, though. I mean, I just not to humiliate anybody. I'm not sure why he did that, but one time we went to visit them, came to visit them, and they came out to meet us in the driveway, and I was pregnant. I was like, what? I don't know, 6 months pregnant, I don't know, 7 months pregnant, definitely showing. And the first thing my father says to me is, Erica, how come you're so fat? I was expecting a hug, a greeting, something nice, you know. And then I just burst into tears. And then my mother, I ran into, I'm sorry, yeah, I said it that way. I did, with an edge in my voice. Yes, I did, because she was being a mother that day, you know. I ran into a room and I was crying. And she said, what? He didn't mean anything like that. You know, why are you taking it so seriously? You tell a pregnant woman she's fat? Mom, you've been pregnant twice. I didn't say that. I was like, Mom, you're just thinking, I didn't know how to express it. You're so insensitive. You're so drinking the Kool-Aid. You know what I'm saying? This is just... So that's where I see like the abusive narcissist dynamic in my parents' relationship. So my mother was always scapegoated by my father. We would have long talks about a lot of things, and I enjoyed having long walks and talks with my father. But very often the subject of my mother's excessive drinking would come up. And of course he was frustrated. And I was judgmental. I never thought to kindly, gently sit down with her at least several times. Mom, you know, I love you. You have a right, you know, to have a few drinks. It's not illegal in our society. It's not even against the Bible. It's not against our religion. But I think you're a little too dependent, and I think you're not the best example for me, Mother. You know, you just, not to be selfish, but maybe you're not setting a good example for my younger brother. You know, just to be kind, just approach them in a kind way. Remember what the Bible says. Paul said, don't rebuke an older man harshly. I didn't, because our culture has us so conditioned to label people alcoholic, 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 pothead, pothead, pothead. Now you can be chewing those gummies every day. And I wonder about some of the people in my family, you know, having their pot gummies and just, yeah, I mean, I had a conversation it didn't, I started everything, I admit that, but they're like laughing, like, I could just almost see like a smoke-filled room, you know, as if they were having a joint, because they were acting that way, talking in a weird accent, just acting like everything's funny, everything's a joke. I mean, that's what pot's supposed to do for you, right? It just, life is fine, it's fine. Unfortunately, for some people, it doesn't affect them that way. They go and do weird things, like violent, weird things. So, you know, be careful. Be careful. You strain out a gnat and swallow a camel. You look at the speck in your mother's eye. You've got a log in your own eye. Watch out. You're going to be addicted to that stuff. If you've started that, I'm telling you. That's why, I'm sorry, folks. I won't try to get on the THC train. I won't do it because I don't know how it's going to affect me. I bought the gummies a couple of times and tried them. And I started feeling really terrible. Terrible, as in not relaxed. I thought, well, if I have another one, it'll make me feel relaxed. I was expecting to feel relaxed. That's all I want, is for something to take my anxiety away, for me to feel relaxed. And the more, I know, I'm like, why do you eat the whole bag? I don't know, because I kept trying to eat more so I could feel relaxed. Is that stupid? Why I was by myself? And I started. One thing I remember is that my brain was shutting down. I couldn't form a sentence in my mind. You know, before I record things, usually I'll be thinking, I'll be forming thoughts, things I might talk about, things I might say. And then I move on. I know, kind of a halting pace, you know, that's me, I'm sorry. I'm like the Amish buggy of the internet, maybe. So that's the reason why there's that warning triangle. Yeah. Get back to the point, you plodding plow horse. Okay. When I had those gummies, especially the last time, I was unable to think about anything. My mind was totally becoming blank. I was like, man, what? It's like, I'm just waiting for the effects to wear off because I'm like, what? I can't think anything. Like my mind was like, it's nothing. It's like, it's like the cosmos, a vast expanse of nothingness. So, I mean, I think that's how some people open doors to evil entities with their marijuana or their THC, because if I had the inability to even think something in my brain, let alone say more than a word or two, if I kept doing that, wouldn't something have possibly hijacked my mentality, at least briefly? So I'm never going to do that again, folks. I'm so sorry. If it works for you, grudgingly I say, very grudgingly. It really helps me with my anxiety, it helps me relax, but having been in some counseling sessions, group counseling sessions, which, I really liked all the people, there were some people who, I can think one young person in particular that obsessively, dependently smoked weed, and that's why she was there, So don't think it can't happen to you. If you can get by without a substance, that's great. My mother was a smoker for so many years, and she saw her father. She had to go be with him the last few days of his life, and what a horrible experience that was for her. She took the Amtrak train all the way down to Florida. She saw him maybe hooked up to a ventilator. The man was dying. It was because he couldn't kick that habit of smoking. He also was a pretty prolific drinker, but he wasn't the sort of person, I don't think he was. He was an old World War II veteran. He didn't go out and get into bar fights or anything like that. At Del Boca Vista, he never got into controversy at Del Boca Vista. That's just a fictional senior retirement community in Florida from Seinfeld, right? But he smoked. He seemed like a very mellow person. Every time I went to see him, he was just extremely mellow. Always smoking, just like his wife, just it's like, this is the life, And he was a nice man. So, you're going to put the A label on my grandfather? That's mean, because, well, there are mean drunks and blah, blah, so it's okay. Yeah. I don't know how alcohol makes somebody hostile. I don't know how that works. I don't. When it starts off making them feel relaxed, and then they get hostile. But I can tell you this. I had a parent who was really mean when they weren't drinking, and habitually really super mean. They did drink, but it wasn't when they were drinking that they were super mean. Do you understand that? And verbally insulting. And so I suppose I absorbed that, into myself. I don't understand why my mother drank. So, yes. Reasons why we shouldn't scapegoat the alcoholic. Not that a person should be an alcoholic. Reach out to them with love and understanding. Show mercy, right? Blessed are the merciful, for they shall obtain mercy. Thank you for listening.